Hey guys, what's up? My name is Chloe and I'm a private pilot. This is my dog Poppy Chulo, and today we are going to tell you all about the wild, crazy adventure of my long cross-country solo that I did for my private pilot license back when I was a student pilot. And I am telling this story for entertainment purposes, but also there is a lot that can be learned from this story. So I know I learned a lot from this flight. So yeah, without further ado, let's just get right into it. My long cross-country solo was St. Augustine, Gainesville, Lake City, back to St. Augustine. And it was originally scheduled at the beginning of a stationary front. Now, for those of you who don't know, a stationary front brings about bad weather, and it can stick around for a while, 10 days, 2 weeks. Stationary front can be in town for a minute. So my flight was postponed, rescheduled, for about 2 weeks. This went on, postponed, rescheduled. It's very emotionally draining when that happens because you get all ready, you get your briefing, you get the winds, you fill out your nav log, you get the plane together, and then it doesn't happen. And it's just like, it just drains all your energy when it doesn't happen. And then you gear up again and it doesn't happen, and it just goes on. So by the time I actually did the flight, that morning, it was a Saturday morning, 8 a.m. was my scheduled time to be at the plane. I was chomping at the bit to go. Now, in hindsight, chomping at the bit to fulfill a requirement for a license or rating would definitely count as an external pressure. So as pilots, we're supposed to run through a checklist that assesses the flight on 4 dimensions, essentially. It's called the PAVE checklist, P-A-V-E. So you assess yourself, the pilot, the aircraft, A, environment, that's the V, and then external pressures. So yeah, chomping at the bit to fulfill a requirement is definitely an external pressure. And it's not good to be motivated by external pressures because they can impair your judgment. So the reason I am saying that is because I'm chomping at the bit to do this flight. I did my briefing, and I found that the weather was going to be okay for my flight, but the TAFs for the airports that I would be going to and leaving from and coming back to, the TAFs all show that the weather would be deteriorating and fast, and it was going to be MVFR and then IFR, and it was just going to get ugly. But I told my CFI, look, here's my briefing. The weather looks good for my flight. I know I can go do this and get back before any of that weather is relevant to me. So he goes, okay, you get out of here now, no delays, you're good to go. So I got signed off, and yeah. Now, before I even tell you about the flight, I will say that one wisdom that I definitely learned from this flight is that there are always 2 flights. There's the one that happens in your imagination on the ground when you're planning, and then there's the one that happens in reality. And back then, I didn't know that. I didn't think about that. And back then, that morning, in my imagination, I'd be the only one in the pattern at all these airports I'm going to, and I'm the only one at hold short. There's no line at hold short. By the way, I had to full stop, taxi back all the time back then. I could not do a touch and go because I would need to analyze every landing and scrutinize it before taking off again. As I'm saying this, I feel so bad for my CFI, for my private. Sorry, dude, if you're watching this. I don't know how you put up with me. Anyways, so yeah, the reason I'm saying that is because the flight, my imagination was happening fast, no line at hold short, and I was, just going to be able to get back ASAP. So anyways, I take off in St. Augustine, go out to Gainesville. The weather is fine. It was so fine. I had forgotten all about that weather conversation I even had with my CFI. Flew to Gainesville, totally normal. Land in Gainesville, there's a line, and I full stop taxi back. There's a line at hold short. There's definitely a line. And I'm sitting there, and sweating in the plane and not really thinking very much about how this was going to affect my flight at all, because the weather thing was already out of my head. And I was just, there, hold short. So I go take off from Gainesville, fly to Lake City. Weather is still fine, perhaps bordering on MVFR, but it was fine. I land there, full stop, taxi back, and then I'm sitting in hold short. I was the first, but there was, I was waiting a lot for landing traffic, about 20 minutes waiting for two pretty fast planes to come in and land. So anyway, I take off from runway 10 in Lake City, and I'm already like in celebration mode in my head, because in my mind the flight is basically done. This is what I learned, by the way, from aviation, that you should not be in celebration mode until you are back where you intended to be. All right, the flight is not done until those wings are tied down at where you intended to go. So but I'm a student. I'm a little bit maybe a little arrogant. I'm like, yeah, I got this, almost done. And I'm supposed to be going back VFR 3,500 feet back east. And I get to 1,400 feet and I realize right away I will not be climbing the 3,500 feet, because there is a broken layer verging on overcast at about 1,900. So I pull the power back to a cruise power setting. And the me of today would have gone back to Lake City. Absolutely. But that was not even a thought in my mind. I pulled the power back to a cruise power setting and thought, well, I guess I'm going to St. Augustine at 1,400 feet. That's going to be my cruising altitude. So, which I didn't like at all, but I'm like, this is what we're going to have to deal with. So as I'm contending with this, somehow, and I to this day do not know how, the frequency 118.175 was getting very, very fuzzy, progressively more fuzzy, to where everybody, controller or pilot, sounded like this on the comms. Cruise is at 10 miles to the east, going on a 3 degrees, 800 miles every second. I don't know why, but it was just fuzzed up. I tuned into other frequencies, like in the area, and they were all fine. It was just Jack's approach, where I had flight following, where it was completely fuzzy. The squelch was not pushed in. It was the frequency. It was so weird. So I'm flying a cruise out at 1,400 feet, and he just fell asleep telling this story. Baby. Okay. Cruise out at 1,400 feet, effectively just lost flight following, and on top of that, I am now headed straight for a restricted area that I had planned on overflying at 3,500 feet, so now I have to re-navigate myself. And all of these things are descending on me as a student pilot with just as much experience as I had at the time. And I thought the two words to myself that I always told myself to never think. From like my second flight lesson, I told myself, you never think these two words. Oh shit. I taught myself and I trained myself to always think, what now? Okay? But I hear myself go, oh shit, in my head. And as soon as I heard those two words, a whole other part of me came out. Like a very stern side of me came out, and I actually said out loud to myself in the plane, shut the fuck up. Excuse my French, that's what I said to myself. Shut the fuck up and fly this plane. I don't want to hear about nothing else. You shut the fuck up and you fly this plane. You may not be able to navigate or communicate right now, but you sure as heck can aviate, and that's what you're gonna do. So I said, okay, Wilco. The weaker side of me went Wilco, and that's what I did. You guys, I flew the shit out of that plane that day back to St. Augustine. If you see my track on FlightAware, it's like this, because I was snapping up altitude wherever I could get it. I did not want to cruise down at 1,400 feet at all. So I was just taking altitude wherever I could get it. I just made peace with the lack of flight following. I didn't know if they could have been talking to me. I don't know. But I just put that out of my head, and I navigated around that restricted, and the ceiling started to lift by about the St. John's River. It was around like 2,500 feet, something like that. So that I started to feel gradually better, especially as I saw the ceiling lift. And at the St. John's River, I thought to myself, let me tune into 120.75. That's the Jack's Approach frequency near St. Augustine. And let me tune in and see if I could talk to someone and tell them I was on flight following and something got messed up, and, see if I can talk to somebody. So I tune in, and I don't hear any but I don't hear anybody talking either. So I gave myself a moment. I took a couple of breaths because I knew I was going to be really disappointed if I couldn't talk to anyone. So I just, accepted that might be the case, and I braced myself for it. And then I keyed the mic, Jacksonville Approach, November, blah, 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 blah. This is where I am. I was on flight following from Lake City to St. Augustine. I lost it. Do you copy? And it was about 2 seconds. It's a long 2 seconds. Then I hear a controller say my tail sign and then the word ident. Guys, I idented so fast. And then he goes, radar contact. I nearly cried. I know it sounds like super dramatic in hindsight, but you have to put yourself in my mindset. In the cockpit there that day with me, I'm, like I said, a student pilot, not a lot of experience. All these things happen, and finally I'm talking to somebody and they can hear me. I nearly cried. So I got the ATIS, and then I switched over to tower, and I was like number 6 in the pattern. I did not care. I was so happy. I could have been number 16. I was so happy to be back in the traffic pattern in St. Augustine. I land, I come back to the ramp, and I see my best friend. She's pre-flighting the Cessna, and I'm just so happy to be back. I didn't even tell her what happened. Didn't say a word. And I didn't even tell my CFI. I don't think I ever told my CFI. CFI for my private, if you watch my channel, this is what happened during my long cross-country solo. I don't think I told anyone at school. Anybody at school watches my channel now, this is what happened. I didn't want to talk about it. It's not that I wanted to erase the memory. I thought it was an important experience. I didn't want to erase that memory, but I just needed time to process what had happened and what it meant. Now, usually I'm on a huge life high after I solo. I've always been since my first solo, if I, when I solo rather and I land, I'm whoo, on an emotional high for 36 hours. It's crazy. But this time it wasn't quite a life high. It was I was on a little bit of a life high, but also, when you do something where you kind of disappoint yourself and you feel like you're reprimanding yourself for hours and hours. I was kind of in that mental space as well, because I felt like I should have known better than to think I could get it done like that. I should have known that with all of my, my needs to full stop taxi back and all that would take time, and I didn't think about that at all, and so yeah, I definitely was I was happy to obviously be back. I was on an emotional high, but I was also processing a lot of the lessons, and yeah, it was a rough one. But yeah, guys, that was my long cross-country solo for my private. Definitely not something I would do again, given everything that I know today, but also driving me even more further towards that instrument rating, because I really cannot wait to be an instrument rated pilot for real, and be comfortable in IMC to where a situation like that does not faze me at all. That's really what I'm looking forward to with this rating. I have not been able to fly the last 3 days. I haven't been able to fly. Since my last flight, I flew a 152 with my friend Sam. He was PIC because I've actually I have never flown Cessna solo. All my time is in a Warrior. But yeah, I flew with him, and then a little financial regroup, and then after I got some, financial recovery from that flight. It started with the weather, so I haven't flown in about a week, and I can't wait to get back in the air. But yeah, that is my story. Let me not go on any more tangents, and let me just end now by saying thank you for watching. Papi Chulo says thank you, and he is such a good storyteller, right? Didn't he contribute a lot to the story? I love him. So he's tired because he was at the airport today. He was at flight school, helping people with their ground lessons. Everyone's doing ground because of the weather. All right, guys. We'll talk to you soon. Bye.